Welcome to Marketopolis, at the crossroads of Wall Street and the internet. In a feed-driven era powered by Reddit, Robinhood, YouTube, X, and many other platforms, retail investors drive the conversation online. Corporate access has been blown wide open, conversations move at the speed of social platforms, and CEOs, IROs, and comms teams are rewriting the investor relations playbook in real time. I'm Matt Joanno, CEO of Stakeholder Labs. Each episode, I talk with public company CEOs and top operators to uncover fresh strategies for communicating and competing in today's markets. Whether you hold a single share or just love the story, you'll take away practical lessons for navigating modern public markets. This is Marketopolis. Let's get into it. Today, I'm joined by Sudhin Shahani, co-founder and board member of SurfAir Mobility, the company working to make regional air travel more accessible, more efficient, and ultimately more sustainable through electrified aviation. Sudhin has played a key role in shaping the company's strategic vision and its relationship with the public markets. We'll talk about SurfAir Mobility's approach to transforming regional flight, but also dive into how Sudhin thinks about communicating with retail investors with transparency, education, and engagement, and looking at the world through a shareholder's lens based on a broader and more vocal than ever shareholder base. Welcome to Marketopolis. Let's get into it. This program is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice, nor solicitation or recommendation regarding any security. All opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the guests and do not reflect the views of Benzinga Inc. or its affiliates. Our show description contains additional disclaimers and disclosures. All right, Sudhin, welcome to Marketopolis. I've been excited to have this conversation. Obviously, we've done some work with your company to date, but I haven't had the opportunity to dig into your story of how you got in this role and really your philosophy around running SurfAir, being on the board of SurfAir, and I think you have a unique story being a co-founder. So maybe to kick things off, if you want to give us a little bit of introducing yourself and SurfAir in general.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Matt. So I'm Sudhin Shahani. I'm the co-founder of SurfAir Mobility. We are in the air mobility space. We have, I think, a pretty unique approach in the space where we have a few different parts of the business. We have a mobility business, which is a combination of scheduled airline and on-demand charter, where we work with a number of different operators in the space. Mm-hmm. And we also have a technology side of the business where we're building software in partnership with Palantir to serve the kind of entire ecosystem is our ambition, the brokers, the owners, the operators in the space. Mm-hmm. And we are kind of positioned well, we think, for the wave of, new electrification initiatives and so on that are industry-wide and that we have our own version of where we are developing with partners and with the OEM Textron electrified versions of the airplane that we're one of the largest operators of, the Cessna Caravan. So we have sort of a platform approach to regional air mobility and where we think the future of aviation is.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe taking a step back, do you want to talk a little bit about the founding story and how you got into this business and maybe even talk a little bit about the business before, because I know you're a serial entrepreneur and multi-time founder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the SurfAir has evolved in a number of different ways. I think there's a sort of a grounding principle that it always had, which was that there are all of these airports in the US that are underutilized, and there has to be a better way for customers to use small aircraft and make them accessible to a much broader audience. When we first, in the early days of SurfAir, it was about the business model that made it more accessible. It was about people sharing small planes, them flying on high-frequency scheduled service or short routes, and leveraging this infrastructure that was only available to kind of high-end private travel. Today, there's a number of new elements and new technologies coming where if you look at the billions of dollars being invested by the industry in advanced aviation, advanced air mobility, a few different terms that have been coined around this, it's really all around a similar thing is, can we make small planes affordable to a much bigger audience? Can you take people off the road into the air? And that's been through various different business models, sort of the mission of SurfAir as we've morphed from scheduled service to expanding into scheduled service plus charter. As we're now trying to develop technology to enable this, we're kind of figuring out the different pieces of the ecosystem as we go. But we've always had a very sort of singular mission around that. Like, can we make small planes affordable to the masses?
I like the way that you've been able to evolve with the company. What were some lessons you might have learned along the way? You're unique. You're co-founder and now board member. But what were some of the lessons you learned along the way in running SurfAir?
As I said, like the business model evolved and changed. I think you've got to be resilient. You've got to kind of move with the market and with the trends to a degree while staying true to the mission. Um, and we've had, there were various iterations of the company where we, in what is considered a complex business, aviation, we figured out the different twists and turns and areas through experience of what works and what doesn't. And you have to be able to move fast. And I think that's just a general entrepreneurial point, regardless of the industry.
Yeah. And I think a part of that journey, taking a company public and going through a direct listing, which is unique to itself, how do you guys think about that? Maybe if you were advising a founder now, like how should they think about going public? But that's something that a lot of people, a lot of founders will think about. Someday I might be able to take this company public on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. Tell us about your thinking when you guys went public, and then maybe some advice in going through that process.
Yeah, I would say this. It was a complex and humbling experience. We had a great team and managed to kind of put it all together. We had a pretty interesting scenario. We went public through a direct listing. We went public at a time when actually, the banking term was that the IPO window was shut.
Oh, wow.
So wasn't really anyone going public at the time we did. And we did so because we were putting together a platform business with a set of different credit. We had a number of things coming together at the time of the listing. We were acquiring a business to increase our scale. We were entering into a strategic partnership with Textron, the OEM, around the electrification of caravans. We had just entered into a partnership with Palantir on the software side, and we had investors coming into the company that were investing on the basis of the company going public. So we had a number of pieces coming together to create this sort of platform approach that we have today, which was a complicated thing to do on day one. So lessons learned, I would say, reduce complexity if you can. You're already doing something. You're going public. Try not to do 5 others at the same time. But in our case, they really unlocked a lot of value for our business. So we had a very specific scenario where we chose to go public at a time when the markets were perhaps not as receptive to new offerings. And I think we then, having gone public in that way, we then had to really educate and cultivate a whole new set of investors to understand our approach, to understand what we were doing. And we're now in a fortunate place where, the number of investors the company has is, I think kind of increased tenfold even in the last 6 months, where people are starting to appreciate what we're doing, and we've got a whole new base, and we're starting to see the benefits of being a public company.
Maybe looking at going from this transition, you went from founder CEO to board member and one of the major shareholders. What's some of the leadership transformations you've gone through, and how do you think about your new role in the company as a part of a broader leadership team in running SurfAir?
Yeah, look, we're extremely lucky to have a great team that we've put around us. I have a co-founder as well, and I would say just another interesting sort of life experience lesson learned along the way is, like, I'm sure for many entrepreneurs it can be quite a lonely process. Having a co-founder is incredibly helpful. Like, we've gone through kind of a lot of different set twists and turns of the business together and come out much stronger. We tend to now focus on supporting the management team, being involved in bigger picture strategic decisions, providing sort of feedback on different kind of higher impact areas. And I think there's an element as a company grows as a founder where you also want to be, I joke, it's almost most important to know what you're not good at and make sure that you surround yourself with, the best people you can to fill those gaps.
As you guys have expanded the team, you brought new folks in. The business is doing a lot these days. How do you think about communicating that story to the market? And I think you've had more institutionally heavy investors. You've had now retail investors that have come into the stock over the last year or so. How do you think about communicating more broadly to the markets these days?
One of our lessons learned in public markets is as much as we can and within the bounds of what you can do, we would like to over communicate. I think that, there's this element of kind of retail versus institutional, which uses sort of conventional wisdom that bankers and so on will say to you. I personally am a firm believer in kind of the general democratization of finance and kind of everything that's happening in the markets and the empowerment of retail. So when we think about retail, I find it difficult for us to say, okay, retail behaves a certain way, or retail investors are one particular category, whereas there are retail investors who have all kinds of different investment strategies. If one were to broadly define a retail investor as someone who just doesn't do that for a living, that doesn't mean that they're not sophisticated about how they invest. So I think we try to meet everyone where they are. We try to make sure that all of the information about the company is disseminated and stays consistent in whichever form, whether it's going out to sort of institutions through, long analyst reports, or whether it's being disseminated on social media, or we're kind of putting out press releases. Like, the idea, I think, is to try and, of course, maintain consistency across, so everyone's getting the same information and we're treating it all with the same level of importance. I mean, we're incredibly fortunate with the number of retail investors that have supported our stock. That's a really important part of our cap table.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The lines are definitely blurring, and you're seeing institutional grade tools be offered to the masses, to your point. So this democratization is happening. I'm curious, when you see these folks coming into your stock, how do you think they discover you? SurfAir had and has a strong brand and awareness factor, but typically, what do you think is piquing the interest of investors when they are exploring SurfAir as an investment?
I think that it's an area that today, and I say this a lot, like, all of the innovation in the aviation space is happening in this area, short haul regional aviation. So there's a lot of attention in that area. There's a lot of at the moment, we're also this really interesting point in the industry where an area that had a very heavy R&D spend, I would say, a few years ago, is now, you're starting to see deals happen in the industry where you see, some of the eVTOL guys, one of them just bought an airport recently. You see this shift in the dollars from just R&D spend to laying the groundwork for infrastructure and for commercialization. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people discover us in that process because, we're here, with the current kind of pioneers in the current iteration of regional mobility. We do it, even prior to all of the new vehicles coming. We flew over 500,000 people last year. We've been focused on the short haul space and using regional airports and so on. And I think there's a lot of discovery that people get when they're looking at the space as a whole and see us as a slightly unique play on that space. Mm-hmm. That's, to answer your question also, I think that I'm always kind of humbled by the power of the brand that's been built along the way, where people we meet in various, different situations are like, oh, we've heard of SurfAir, we flew SurfAir. So I think that's been a function of like building that brand over the last decade. So some people certainly come in that way, but I think there's a general investment interest in this being one of the most interesting sectors of aviation, particularly, and in an area where we have a unique approach.
That makes a lot of sense. And we're seeing this evolution of retail investors in the different types of investment they're making, the different sectors that they're exploring. When you're looking more broadly at let's say, retail investors, and you talked about the democratization of investing, do you think it's become simpler to be a retail investor or more complex in today's world with how many different options and types of investments are out there in tools and apps? Is it a simpler world to be in a retail investor or more complex?
It's a good question. I would like to think that it's simpler because things rise to the top, and the more transparency you give people, the more tools you give them, and empower them with. You would think that people are just consuming data and information at a much faster pace than they ever did. Markets move at a much faster pace than they ever did. Mm-hmm. But again, like, that should, to some degree, make things more efficient. That would be the hope.
Shifting gears to you personally, we like to ask folks that come on this show, how do you actually track your own stock? Are you using the app on Apple? Are you on Robinhood? Are you getting an email with a lot more information every day? Most CEOs will say they try not to track their stock, but they do. I'm curious, what app do you use there?
Yeah, I would suggest if they say they're not tracking their stock, they're not telling the truth. would be my view on it. Look, I use the standard. I mean, I use Apple stocks. I use Google Finance. I don't, the New York Stock Exchange sends quite a handy end of day email that gives you some of the technical roundup and so on a daily basis. But it's certainly an area where there's opportunity, I would say, to have, more tools geared to companies.
Yeah, it is interesting. We hear a lot from public company executives that they're just using the standard Apple stock app, and that's where they get their information. What about information sources, newsletters, podcasts? What's your information diet? Are you getting the Wall Street Journal? Do you have CNBC pulled up on your screen? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, all of the traditional kind of the Wall Street Journals, the Bloombergs, CNBCs, and so on, I think is an area. I like to actually also see what's happening on the Reddits and the stock twits and the different message boards. As I said, retail is an important part of kind of our cap table. Mm-hmm. And you tend to get real-time sentiment analysis on what's going on with that just by looking at, going through the boards and staying on top of that.
Yeah, so maybe on that front, I know you guys have done a lot on some of these platforms. How do you think, what's your philosophy around communicating to retail and kind of meeting them where they're at on some of these platforms and engaging them a little bit more directly?
I think recently we've just started what I hope is the first in a series of initiatives around engaging more with retail. Mm-hmm. We certainly see the importance of it. The first initiative was prior to our earnings call. We actually used the Say platform, a part of Robinhood, to get retail questions, which frankly was some of the most insightful questions we had gotten, and we could see which questions gotten the most upvoted, and then pick those to answer. Mm-hmm. And we very specifically stayed very true to that, where we said, okay, regardless of whether it's a hard question or not, we're going to pick the question with the most upvotes, and that's how we're going to answer. That's the ones we're going to take. We look to do a lot more retail engagement as we go. I think it's important, the whole field of IR. I mean, as you know, with the things you guys are doing with your company, the field of IR is becoming so different. The discipline of communicating with your, call it 10 to 20 institutional top shareholders, is a very different discipline than communicating with your kind of 50,000 retail shareholders. And it's almost like the difference between sales versus marketing or so on. And still making sure you stay on brand and on message and transparently give everyone the right information. Because I think one of the key things in today's market is to cut through the noise and make sure that as much as possible, everyone has the same, get rid of the information asymmetry.
Yeah, I think that direct access piece, I keep hearing transparency from you and ensuring that everyone has access to the same information at the end of the day. Looking at SurfAir Mobility, you're doing a lot right now. So I would be curious how you think about communicating these different types of businesses to these different types of shareholders, and the way that you're delivering these messages and the messages themselves. Maybe to start, tell us a little bit again about the different sides of your business, how they all come together, and then we can get into how you communicate those more directly.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for us is to explain to people that while we have these different businesses, each of the businesses are complementary to each other and actually create exponential growth for each other. So at the end of the day, we have kind of two core customers. We've got people who fly on our airplanes, we've got the passengers, and we've got the operators. And if you look at the different elements of our business, we're really trying to be, to some degree, as in this new world, like the picks and shovels of regional air mobility and where it's going from a technology perspective, particularly. So the goal is to grow our operator base. Where today we work with 400 or so flight operators. Mm-hmm. We want to continue to increase that base, and we want to be the provider to them, not just of distribution and connect customers with them, but also be the underlying software infrastructure to help them run their businesses more efficiently, to help introduce new electrification technologies and new hardware/vehicle solutions to them. Because that's really where this is going. And that's where we feel that our decade of experience in the space can really be helpful. And there's an opportunity right now where commercial aviation has a lot of tools, has a lot of software tools, there's a lot there in terms of large, I'll call it large format, big planes. But what the industry calls the Part 135 world, to simplify, small planes, doesn't really have the tools, the infrastructure. It's kind of an industry where, as we think about the advancements in AI and vertical AI, it's in a perfect spot to create vertical AI software solutions for it.
And that last point, you guys have partnered with Palantir to help build some of this out. Do you want to share a little bit more about that partnership? I know retail's been excited about the work you've been doing there. If you want to share as much as you can on that partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so they've been a great partner. We first engaged with them, pre-listing and so on, to help us build out what we saw were essential tools to run our own business, because nobody was building those tools.
Okay.
Which naturally led us to a point where we saw that there was an opportunity to offer them to the industry at large. Mm-hmm. So there was a very natural evolution for that. And, in this kind of world of AI where everyone's trying to figure out what are the right kind of, where does AI actually make money? Where is it just noise? What are the verticals where it matters? I think I've said before, this is a vertical where, we think that there's advantages of bringing in unique data sets, proprietary data sets, and we think of ourselves as an expert where we can actually leverage that data. And we've been working with Palantir, their Foundry and AIP platform, which provides kind of the back-end data infrastructure. But we, as the domain expert, have been building our own set of proprietary applications that bring all those different pieces of data together and create real actionable solutions for different people in the value chain.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I see a lot of these industries moving very quickly on the AI front and partnering with folks like Palantir, and they're areas that I think we don't always think about, but there's a lot of powerful leverage there. Looking at where you guys are at today, I'm curious, beyond the share price and kind of top line financials, how do you personally track metrics of success for SurfAir? What does that look like or feel like beyond the financial sides?
I think the platform deployment, or what we will be tracking a lot more of as we've kind of roll out, what we've talked about, the software and SurfOS and so on, is metrics around the B2B side of the business, metrics around how we're adding more operators, how we're deploying the software in more places, how we're kind of really being more of the picks and shovels of the space.
Sure.
That's going to be one of the key new areas of metrics we track. We, of course, for our mobility business, track things like flights flown, passengers, how many people are moving from point A to point B. That's the eventual point of all of this.
Yeah.
But I think the B2B side is what we'll be tracking a lot more of as we grow.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch that grow and expand. Looking at you personally, and maybe going out 5 years from now, what's something that you could look back on SurfAir and you'd say, yeah, we've been successful, or you're proud of something that you built, maybe within the mobility space or just generally with the company itself?
Yeah, I think given the place where the industry's at, and given that there's, in our view, about to be an exponential growth curve for the business with all the new tech that's coming to market, some of which we're involved in developing, some of which we just want to bring to market.
Yeah.
I think just bringing more people into this ecosystem would be something we'd look back and be right. Like if we're enabling a whole new set of operators to exist, if we're providing a new set of tools to enable the ones that do exist to kind of get beyond where they are today, and if we're really seeing that growth of the ecosystem as a whole, and we had some meaningful part of that, that would be success.
Oh, I love that. And maybe shifting gears a little bit, we talked a lot about retail investors. I'm curious personally, how do you think about investing? A lot of the execs I talk to, much of their upside is tied to their company, obviously running the company. But how are you thinking about investment maybe outside of your company? Are you on Robinhood investing in individual companies? Are you angel investing? Are you a real estate guy? How do you approach that?
I'm more of an angel / innovation kind of, like, I like to figure out who's solving the hard problems.
Sure.
Which is, and kind of we're at earlier stages of the journey that, a journey that we kind of went through and saw.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are there any particular sectors or industries that you're excited about now when you're looking through that lens?
I mean, I think, as this is an overplayed term, everyone's looking at various, like, AI is pervasive everywhere now. I think finding those AI verticals that are the ones where you could, where really, technology is at a point that it can be impactful today is always interesting to see. There's this kind of blend of, like, AI plus people that's kind of becoming a new trend and rising to the top. And, like, that's where, I've been curious to look at, like, where are the areas where there's real world AI technology that can create big outcomes today.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's interesting to see that human in the loop dynamic and how that's able to unlock efficiencies for some of these companies on the ground. If you had a message for retail investors for SurfAir today, what would be that message? What would you tell them? Obviously, you just had earnings, so I'm sure you shared that there a little bit. But what's kind of that high level message you would want to share to retail?
I think that, and I think this is one of the reasons a lot of retail has been, I mean, different reasons we track that retailer or just investors in general are in the stock. One, we have a great team that we're very proud of and have been executing against what we call our transformation plan. So we kind of laid out to the market a year ago, these are all the things we're going to do. And these are the steps we're going to take. And we're in the middle of kind of executing against those things. So that's one thing I would say for new investors coming in the stock to even look back and kind of get the history of like, this is what the company said they were going to do and they've done it and are continuing to do it. And then forward looking, I think which is again tied to this overall plan it's the deployment of technology as we go forward. It's our SurfOS initiative, I would say.
Super helpful. And maybe digging into that, what are the metrics that you might encourage investors to follow? Like what are some of the guiding lights or guiding principles against the business that you feel like are going to become more important in the future?
I think the operational metrics, and we release these, each quarter. And as I said, we put out this transformational plan and we have metrics against the core, the airline and the on-demand business, which should make it simple to track the progress of the company. There will likely be, as we kind of start to commercialize the SurfOS and the technology side of the business, a new set of metrics in addition to the core operational metrics that we will release to investors in the future to track the B2B side.
Going back, we have a lot of different investors on different platforms. We have different levels of sophistication. How do you think about communicating to these different groups of investors? You guys have a multi-part business, and there is some complementary aspects that are critical to understand. But how do you think about communicating the different types of business to these different audiences of retail investors?
I think it's important to note that there's a simple message around what we're doing. We're focused on kind of moving people from point A to point B, getting them off the road into the air, and making short haul travel more affordable. And the different parts of the business that we're involved in all cater towards that same goal. There are different constituents in the industry that have to come together to make that all work, and that's why we're in the technology business of connecting them all together. That's why we're helping them all bring their data together onto a common platform. But I think at the end of it, like in all different areas where we're focused, despite the different types, different business units we have, they're all highly complementary to each other and they're all supporting the same goal, which is let's build the infrastructure for this industry going forward.
Maybe going into each of them, do you want to tell us a little bit about the electrification, SurfOS, the legacy business? Let's talk about each and go a little bit deeper on each.
Yeah. So the legacy business, I would say, is comprised of two forms. It's people flying point A to point B scheduled service, where small airport to small airport. We're the largest operator of the Cessna Caravan, which is one of the more prolific, I would say, turboprop aircraft in the market. So that's think of that as a traditional airline type business, but focused on regional short hops. We have a charter business, which is also regional focused, even though we do cover a broader range of missions and trips. And that's where it's more asset light. Think like an Airbnb or an Uber in the space. We are the brand that sells the flight. We do the customer service. We work with a network of operators to service the flights. And then when we move to the technology side of the business, SurfOS is software that's being built really to productize or to create software products for the different constituents that make one of these flights happen, which is every flight has an operator of the aircraft, an owner of the aircraft, a passenger that takes the aircraft, and in the charter world, often a broker that both finds the passenger and finds the aircraft. If you can take all of those different groups and align all of their data onto a common platform to help them all make the most efficient decision, you've created some value in the industry. And then on the electrification side, our strategy is twofold. It is both, given our base of both operators and customers, we feel like we're very well positioned to bring all of the winners in new electric technology to market. So we would like to be the brand that introduces those to operators and to consumers. And we also, given our scale as a Cessna Caravan fleet operator, have our own proprietary project. We're working with a number of other players in the supply chain to design hybrid electric and fully electric powertrains for that Cessna Caravan to make it more efficient.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You can see how all those pieces play together. Within the sector, within the industry, how do you guys think about competitors? Who are the notable folks that are maybe competing with you guys on different areas of the business?
I would think on the mobility business, often we're competing on these routes with people driving, in some cases with traditional airlines.
Oh, wow.
I would say for the charter business, there are a number of players in the charter space, and we have a focus on short haul, and we try to offer kind of a layer of customer service. And again, with the things we're doing with software, we think we can offer a better solution of getting you to the right airplane for the right mission. And in the software side, I don't think anyone that we know of is focused on serving tools to all of the different constituents and kind of bringing them onto a common platform. I think that would be a competitive advantage of ours. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, on the electrification side, we actually would like to collaborate with all of the people doing incredible, ambitious projects in the space to bring them into our platform.
I love it. Well, Sudhin, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. Love diving deep into these different topics. Excited to follow you guys as you continue to build and grow and communicate to the markets. Thank you for the time.
Great to be here, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Marketopolis, powered by Stakeholder Labs. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss upcoming conversations with the leaders shaping modern investor relations.